Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Matt. It's a pleasure to be here.
You're talking to us from Silver Lake in Los Angeles currently. Give us the state of the state. Tell us what you consider yourself. What's your day-to-day like? What are you doing these days? And then we'll dig into the past.
Okay, cool. There's a few different answers. There's literally the state of the state this morning. We're speaking at 9 a.m. my time. And I cannot tell you the amount of things that have already happened today. So this is like a beautiful pause for me to be sitting down in one place. But what you're really asking is, like, who am I in the world in this moment, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am many things at once, and the pursuit of balance is always of interest to me. But I'm a musician. I'm a touring musician. I'm a mastering engineer. I'm a multidisciplinary artist. I'm a overly feeling person. Somehow all of these things add up to be an interesting combination of what I can bring to all of the things that I do. But yeah, that looks like different things on different days. So sometimes I'm on tour for chunks of time. Sometimes I'm working on my own music. Sometimes I'm figuring out all the nuances of life. But a through line consistently for over 25 years now is I've been a mastering engineer. So that at different times has been the full-time 24/7 aspect of my life. And 2 to 3 decades in, it looks more like, how do I balance all of the things that I do so that I can be a fuller person, and in that way show up even more for the clients that I take on and the projects that I do, and what I can bring to that dialogue, both with my expertise, but also sanity, empathy, professionalism. Is that concise enough for the state of the state?
No, that's very good. But I'm curious, as an artist, do you perform under the name Sarah Register, or do you have a different name?
That's an excellent thing. I was struggling with that for the last few years because I've played in many bands. So it's been my bands with other people, but they have names. So it's an interesting thing because generally my name exists in the world as mastering engineer, and I haven't muddied the waters. It's not exactly the right term, but for the first time this year, I'm releasing material under my own name, which is kind of a big deal to me. So it's no matter how important, poignant, valuable all of my previous bands have been, and some ongoing, this stuff is really personal to me, means the world to me. And it took me a little while to decide that it was just going to be my name. You're not asking this, but there's a little corollary too. Like when I became a mastering engineer independent of any other studio, I was also asking the question, just going to laugh at this, like, what cool business name do I need to have? What cool studio name do I need to have? And eventually I was just like, it's just me. It's just Sarah Register. It's just, people like to do however they credit the things, but I have moved so far away from giving a fuck about how people normally do things, mm-hmm. that my piece with Mastered by Sarah Register is a relief. The industry in our lifetimes has changed so much in so many different ways. I came up in a very different kind of set of ideals and circumstances than maybe were natural to me and my integrity. And it's taken this lifetime to keep on moving towards how I believe art should be served, how I believe humans should be talked with. And I do the best I can. I'm human, so it's too. There's got to be waves to what I'm capable of, but I'm pretty damn confident of the space I exist in this world right now.
Well, let's come back, because I want to dig into the balance part of that, because I can definitely identify with a bit of that myself. But let's go back to the beginning. Where did you grow up?
Let me nutshell it. I was born here in Los Angeles. We moved when I was young. Both my parents are scientists, so we've followed science around. So when I was pretty young, we moved to Oklahoma, which you might not necessarily see the connection, but in the 70s and 80s, a lot of money for research lived within the oil industry. Mm-hmm. So research, R&D, brought my family to Oklahoma when I was a kid. So I grew up there, like all those powerful and damaging experiences of high school and whatnot happened for me there. And I promptly hightailed it to New York City when I just after my 18th birthday. So I've lived most of my life in New York City, a little over 25 years. And recently I gravitated back towards Los Angeles without a super specific plan on how that was going to look. But New York really gets its claws in you. So sometimes you just have to drive away and not know what's happening. And then you end up somewhere else for a couple years. So it seems like I live in Los Angeles now. But I have a lot of ties to New York. I have a lot of things I actually need to resolve there. But I built up my life and my studio life and things here with ease. I have bandmates here and a band that I'm very active with. I have a lot of friends here. Obviously, the New York LA connection is a strong one.
Definitely.
Yeah. So
when you were growing up, were your parents encouraging of music or technology?
my parents are enormous music fans. It's beautiful and adorable. Deep respect to them. They're around 80-ish. Let's just call them 80-ish, and they go around to folk music festivals around the country. They still live where I grew up, and it means the world to them. And I'm constantly like, "Are you guys hydrated? What's happening? How's it?" But that's a different thing. I am very charmed, and I always have been very touched by their great love of music. There was not always like, it's not like a scenario where we're all sitting around a piano singing together or anything like that, but their record collection is full of, well, I'm going to say oldies from this vantage, but it wouldn't have been oldies then, but like, and a lot of just really beautiful stuff. They had eclectic taste, they had interesting taste, artistic taste, and so I grew up with a lot of music around the house, and I can see from this vantage how much that meant to them. You know, they were like young kids going to cafes and like seeing Joan Baez, and like they brought something there. It wasn't a direct one-to-one. Like, I don't think we've ever even talked about what it meant to them and how that may have translated to me or whatever, but it's always been very special to them. In terms of supporting, well, and technical, our technical acumen goes in different ways. In some ways, I'm a black sheep because, you know, audio engineer is not the same as engineer. But yeah, there was never any cap on our family's concept of how technical you could be, how much you could take on in that kind of a field. And that both came to me naturally in an early dialogue with, you know, evolving computers through the 80s and very, very silly, but early like program language, like toying around when I was a little younger. But yeah, it's interesting how much there is there that kind of has a Venn diagram, but they also so deeply do not understand my actual technical life or like the mastering side of it. And you know, it's kind of like their incredible fandom, their incredible support for the arts, if I were to guess, almost kind of puts a wall up against understanding how it all happens. So I cannot tell you, but it's also me. I'm their kid. So even though I'm 46, there's still the dynamic there where they're like, "What do you do?" And I'm like, I could not have explained this to you more or less than 500 times in really elevated ways. But I guess we're going to have this conversation our whole lives. So even with my verbal acumen, my expertise, I have yet to truly get past my dad's understanding of what I do.
Which is fascinating as a scientist, you know, both parents as scientists too. And I had to giggle a bit when you said engineer, because my father is an electrical engineer. And so whenever I say the term audio engineer, I always feel like, is that really accurate? Shouldn't it be recordist or, you know, something else? I feel like we're not really giving the respect to that group of people, like our parents and their understanding of that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I don't care anymore, but when I was younger, and especially in the construct of the science family that I grew up in, I think I did struggle a little with like, what are the definitions? What are the things? And now we all know it's like, just do it. Sometimes
Yeah.
labels don't make the most sense, and we have to have some sort of vernacular. But, my dad's a nuclear physicist, my mom's an environmental scientist, and they both have broad ranging interests outside of those specificities.
What was the evolution of your journey into the world of mastering? And were there other stops in mixing or recording or other elements of our business?
My connection to it is music. I'm obsessed with music. I was always obsessed with music. It's just a no-brainer. I happen to be a very technically adept person, and to some degree, I was doing the math in my head of like, how can I help? How can I be whatever? I did ultimately know in some ways that I was going to be the artist that I am too, but especially when I was younger, there was less clarity about what I'm allowed to do. That's just some growing up bullshit things. But there was no doubt that it was within my wheelhouse to be, like a powerful tool technically. And I also had this vast love of music, right? So I gravitated very strongly towards seeing what I could do in that department, which meant moved to New York City, went to NYU, immediately started doing the most, started working at Sony and their like experimental HD programs in the 90s, which is essentially just a format that no one would remember called CD Plus, where I was fielding a lot of problematic issues about Celine Dion CD Pluses. But it was putting myself in position after position to see what worked. So that was like a heavy duty corporate position that also was technical. I immediately started interning at a studio that was, it was called The Place then. Oh yeah, and then it became Stratosphere Sound later, but its original version was The Place on 14th Street in Meatpacking. And I immediately started being an assistant to like a remix guy producer. There's reasonably cool studios at NYU. NYU has reshaped a lot of the ways since then, because again, I went to school in the 90s, but there were cool studios there. So I was in those studios working with people, working with bands. Really loved, there was actually a ton of experimental like music, specifically synthesis options there, which was great for me because in Oklahoma, there wasn't much connection to the avant-garde. And I very strongly lean towards the avant-garde naturally, but it, sometimes when you pick up what you can pick up, you understand what you can understand, but I wasn't in front of tools. I wasn't in front of minds that were thinking about it. So plopping down into like a room full of buchlas, a room full of all these different kinds of ways of making sound differently. And I'm not a classically trained musician. I'm a real, I'll do anything kind of beginner's mind person. And there's the things that I'm good at now. But that was also another thing to do was with the brilliant science parents, there was an idea of you don't do something unless you're an expert at it. And no part of me is ever going to be an expert at technicality of performance. I will be an experimenter with performance, which is in my benefit, but it took me a while to understand that there's a power there. And it's no hierarchy. I have so much respect for the musician I know, and I'm so lucky to know so many musicians that are like superlative beyond, but I also see my place as the experimenter. Getting to New York, I dove in pretty thick, and it did give me some sense of where I was having more fun, where I was more called, and I was not loving tracking or mixing. It's totally great. So much love for the people that's their calling. But yeah, I found my way towards mastering through spreading myself out, doing a bunch of other things relatively quickly. So before I'd graduated, I was mastering in the mastering studio at NYU, but I was making it work. And I already knew that for me felt like the highest synthesis of my interest in what was happening, my interest in the bigger picture, like the zoom out, zoom in that is possible in mastering, and very sincerely also my aptitude psychologically, like holding people at the end of this process, having a sense of what has happened, because I technically knew what had happened before, but you get people at the end of their process, they're just about to release their thing. It's the very end. There's certain something there it's different in every stage. So yeah, mastering spoke to me, and I eschewed everything else and barged boldly into the world of mastering in New York City, and took on a lot of responsibility really, really quickly, in a way that, you know, I compressed the 10,000 hours quite rapidly.
Nobody said you had to do the 10,000 hours all in one pass, right? But it sounds like you might have.
There was some messaging in the music industry of never stop, never sleep, never whatever.
Okay, your 10,000 hours starts now. Go.
Yeah. And if you didn't sleep before, I think the longest stretch, and I have so much to say about mental health and advocacy for like health and sanity in the music industry now versus what I saw when I was younger. But I think the longest I was ever up because I needed to be up was 5 days in a row working on projects. And that's not okay. There's no
torture.
part of that's okay. But I was in an ethos. I was surrounded by an ethos that said, this is better than saying no, or this is better than asking if somebody can push a deadline. And again, I've learned so much from how hard I went. And there's also a lot of things I had to unlearn and recalibrate too. I don't care what the industry tells me. I will make my own space in this.
The initial interest in audio, do you remember when that started?
Well, this is the cute thing that I sort of mentioned earlier, but I didn't actually tell the story. So me and my obsession with music, not just was music playing around my house in a way that noticeably was quite beautiful, by myself in headphones, night and day, going to bed every night, da, da, da. I did have this cassette deck in the early 80s, and it makes me laugh thinking about it now. It was a great little cassette deck, but it happened to have a graphic EQ on it. And it wasn't just like 3 bands. I think it was like 8 bands. And looking back at that, I'm like, I loved that graphic EQ and I was always tweaking it. I'm like, okay, I might see who I am. I get it.
You could see the through line easy from that to mastering.
I sure can. And you know, there's so many things we don't have control over about how music ends up in the world, but I see how I am that kid still that's like, let me get this to the best listening place. And of course, at that point, I was just working on my own draw to it and draw to what I thought sounded interesting. And now, for so many years, it's been very important to bring my expertise to the table and also hold really carefully, what do the artists want? Like, what serves them best? There's what might be right for them based on their peers, based on their experiences. And there's also, what was their intention? Where do they want to be with this? It doesn't have to fit the box that's right for them if they had a different thing that they wanted to do. And then my job is to be open and advise if they're going somewhere far or askance from what might be normal. But I find it really fun getting into, you know, where did you want this to be? There is the aspect of like, what peers did you want this to live next to reasonably? Mm-hmm. But the idea that it doesn't all have to be just one crushed, most maximized, most mid-range, most whatever, whichever thing somebody might consider as normal now. There's plenty of territory to get material into highly competitive spaces with individuality. So I find that fun.
Time spent in New York versus how long you had been mastering, and was there multiple places involved?
So if I moved there in 97 and I did hit the ground running, but I wasn't properly mastering like on a real level for people until about 99. And then I hit the bigger world of mastering in 2000, 2001, early. Yeah, by early 2001, I was going really hard. With this being 2025, that puts it at a 25 years. More than 25 years in the industry in different ways, but 25 years exclusively focusing on mastering as my area of priority and expertise on a constant journey. We're always still learning, and the
Yeah.
industry is changing with us, so we have to change too. But yeah, that is the duration. And so I suppose a little more 27, 28, something like that, years living in New York.
When did you make the move to Los Angeles, and was that your first choice, or had you considered Nashville? Had you considered other places? No, straight up Los Angeles.
I shake my head respectfully because
Yeah.
so many beautiful people and so many beautiful places. What is true is I came to Los Angeles to winter because, like whatever, 26, 27, whatever years of New York City winters, maybe a change is good. But what's true, and what at least one of my closest friends predicted, was that I never went back. Which seems to happen. I'm not the only story that goes that way, but
That sunshine's addictive.
the sunshine is good. I will tell you, this is a good winter. It's an excellent winter, but it's another crazy city. It has all of its stuff that can be hectic, but I would say the vast trade up on nature has been really, really valuable to me. And again, I love New York City. It's in my bones forever. But I also just was there last week for a show, and I was like, the city's very hard on my nervous system. I'll always figure out new ways. Like I was actually just talking with a friend about like, well, maybe if I did XYZ, maybe if I did some kind of intentional, like a residency or a thing, then I'd spend maybe 3 months in New York and I'd recalibrate. I'd bring aspects of my business back. But at this point, to a large degree, I can be portable with everything that I'm doing, including mastering. So there's flexibility there to be different places.
So this is actually not that old of a move here. This is...
Oh no, I'm cruising past 2 years, which is crazy because again, I didn't intend to move, but it has passed 2 years, and it's been very action-packed years. Like a lot of things happen that weren't necessarily expected, and sometimes you just got to go with the flow.
And John Greenham and John and his daughter Tess are mastering engineers in Los Angeles. John and I are friends. He used to live up here in the Bay Area. He told me that, in fact, I think numerous people, Sylvia Massey, everybody seems to agree that the 2-year time period when you make a move, because Sylvia also moved from the Bay Area down to Los Angeles, the 2-year time period is the incubation period when moving to a new place. And that I know for John, initially it was kind of slow going, but then boom, it was like Ice Cube and Billie Eilish and, a lot of heavy duty people. And then that kind of put John, more on the map than where he had been years prior. So I'm curious how this incubation period for you is going. And are you starting to see the possibility of major growth and establishment of you as an artist and as a mastering engineer in Los Angeles?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I haven't heard this the 2-year incubation period. It's honestly nice to hear because there's still questions that are in my mind about what is home, what is a home base, and that's sort of, we all figure that out for ourselves over time. But transitioning here and bringing mastering with me, like thank God I brought my mastering stuff with me instead of just being like, I'm gonna
test the waters.
Yeah. So there was never any cessation, like it all just continued. So the normal amount of projects that I had kept going. With any change, there's, let's be a little fruity, like heartache and benefit, like what doors open, what you leave behind. I think there was absolutely some aspect of freedom of changing up the circumstance so significantly. Thankfully, that didn't impact my business in a way that was negative. Most people don't do attended sessions anymore, too. So in some ways, honestly, it didn't even come up. And then I'd be like, oh, wait, let me make sure people know because they're so used to me being a New Yorker, and I am too. Yeah, there's an expansiveness to changing things as an adult. I was probably however old I was, 44 or something, 43 when I moved here. This is a pivotal time in life. Every time is pivotal, but and being in a space where I'm also continuing on the journey of what my own artistic practice is. There's collaborators here that it's been really fun and good to be in close proximity with, so that we can be more in touch than in New York. I have such beautiful, amazing, powerful artist creators that I'm so lucky to know in New York. And in the world I came up in on that side, which I kept totally separate from mastering for so long because I just kind of like my brain couldn't. But I was very much in DIY, like avant-garde noise music world, and it had such a cool scene, and some people really rose out of that scene, and I had my own moments of a lot of cool respect coming towards my projects, but there might have been a box around the scene, at least how it was in my brain. And so coming to LA and experiencing different kinds of established scenes and different kinds of things was useful. And then also I had since 2020, I've been playing with Kim Gordon's solo project. So that takes me in and around different worlds that have a lot to do with my DIY past, but also are much more mainstream in some ways. And again, connective tissue there. I would not compare myself to the brilliant Kim Gordon, but we have a lot more in common in our kind of experimental history towards music.
Mm-hmm.
And we're both operating in a world here in LA where there's tons of that. There's a million different versions of that. And it's so freaking cool. But like, for example, in the band that we play in for her solo project, the other two main players for the last 4 years are killer, highly trained, like best of the best musicians. And the coming together, the synthesis of what we can all do together with our different attributes, I will say without any chagrin, makes for such an amazing show. Mm-hmm. And it also put me in a space with, different kinds of musicians, like the way a malleable but individually elevated session musician can move in and out of things is so different from the DIY world that my art stuff came up in. And it's good to get your mind blown. And it's good to have friends that you're so impressed with, and in some ways hopefully vice versa. So yeah, there's absolutely expansive experiences for me in shifting location. There's also something really wonderful about going back home. Like, it was really amazing to be back in New York last week for a show, but there's too many people I love, too many artists I'm interested in seeing what they're up to. You can't do it all. It gets a little crazy. Everybody's all hopped up on caffeine. So again, balance. I'm figuring it all out. But hopefully that long-winded answer spoke to some of what you were asking.
Yeah, it did. And I'm curious, when you say you brought your mastering gear with you, and I told you we wouldn't really talk about gear, but I'm just kind of curious. At this point, do you feel it's best to be in an in-the-box kind of setup to keep things, budget friendly, portable, all the benefits that come with that?
Easy answer, yes, for me. I'm not suggesting yes for anybody else. Like, we all get to do this in the way that we feel most comfortable with, but easy answer for me is yes. And that's been that way for almost 10 years. And so I've had plenty of time to get used to it, because I will say I came from such like a kind of like high-minded, almost snooty analog background in mastering from the late 90s into the early aughts. And of course, also plugins were bullshit then. So
true.
It's not like there was a rationale for it. And I am not immune to a big, gorgeous rack of gear, like Pultecs that are perfectly restored. Oh, I dream of things. I really love tape machines. I felt a more than a kinship with the ATR that I spent most of my, no offense, studio, but a lot of my early time in tape world on. And that just is what it is. That's a part of our crazy ass changing industry. Is it took me a lot both to get convinced technically and also to let go of what, to a degree more than is helpful, was an egoic attachment to the way things have been.
Mm.
But going through the journey of seeing more and more advances to the point where I grew to become seamless in the digital tools. It's funny, like I had to go through like a period of shame where I was like, yeah, yeah. But I'm so far past that now, and I'm so confident of what's possible that it's like, hell yeah, I'm in the box. I love it. And who knows, somebody plop
Mm.
down a couple $100,000 and buy me all the toys in the world. And who knows what I would outfit myself with, but I don't need any of that. It's not a question of need. It's just a question of what makes you most amused. Honestly, if somebody gave me that much money, I should probably figure out exactly the right charities to do it with, because I don't need it to do the job that I'm doing. And the way, also very honestly, the way the In the Box can be efficient
Yeah.
creates more space for opening the door to more projects coming in, which is a thing that's possible. I'm very happy to have tons of work lined up, and new people can approach me now and develop new relationships with me, which is just part of, again, trying to find the balance, trying to find what's most efficient whilst also being highest level.
There's so many traditions tied to the past, the analog workflow in mastering, for example. I've always had friends who are like, oh, you can never mix and master. And yet, like all of that has changed. I consider myself more, first and foremost a mixing engineer, but I do master.
Totally.
I've had friends who master who told me, oh yeah, they would complain about mixing engineers mastering, but then I would see my mastering friends mixing, and I'm like, hey, talk the talk and walk the walk, right?
Yeah.
But it's truly funny though. There is, and I mean, whatever. I kid in many respects on that, but I definitely have some friends who I think want to go in the box in their world of mastering, but they are concerned about the perception from their high-end clients that is somehow less than.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, I think that's bullshit.
It is bullshit. Well, again, I'm going to leave space for everybody to feel the way that they feel. For me, it's bullshit. For me, how can we say this without revealing too much? On the inside of the industry, I'm sure you see this too, it's the norm. And it's the norm at very, very high levels. And that's, if it's not spoken about, I get how the stigma continues to play forward. So I won't speak for anybody else that I know their truth, but I'm very comfortable owning and honoring how confident and how happy and how satiated I am by the way that I'm working right now. So the stigma thing is real. That was part of what I was describing as the kind of like egoic, how do I let go? I can absolutely, I mean, I guess maybe there's more that I wouldn't have known about. Most people, when they approach me about a project, we actually do the project. But I can think of one where it was early in my transition and I was like, yeah, straightforwardly, I'm working in this way. Not because that's what I need to lead any conversation with, but I was just having like a nice conversation with an artist that we're peers. And he was like, oh, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. I would rather do a different route. And I was like, that's a bummer for me because I love your music and I have no doubt in any way about me being able to create a best case scenario for you. But I'm not going to bend over backwards or pretend or like lie that I'm going to like pull some of my old gear out of storage and be like, oh, listen, I ran it through something just to run it through something. And I mean, that was also a nice boundary for me to be like, the less bullshit in my life, everything is better because, the music industry taught me a lot of bullshit. But I absolutely lost that job because that guy at that point, which probably was like 2015, wasn't mad about it. He was just like, actually, for me, I think I can't go that way with you right now. I was like, okay. And, since then, I would say probably at least 1,000 happy customers. So we're good.
Yeah, and my audience is probably so sick of me using this analogy, but I think it is such an appropriate analogy, and I'll say it again, and everybody's going to probably say it with me who has listened to me for the last 10 years. It doesn't matter what gear you use to make the meal as long as it tastes good. Nobody cares if it's an electric stove or a gas stove or cast iron pans or cheap ass IKEA pans. If you can make a badass tasting meal, what else matters?
Yes. And that's also the funny thing about the industry too, right? Because there's there's a lot of really good food analogies. I really enjoyed I'm here to cook the burger how they want it to be cooked within reason. But there's also the how does a sausage get made? Most
Right.
people don't want to see how the sausage gets made, especially in this industry, because it's in some ways not that cute. And that's, again, everybody's doing their own thing. I'm so proud. I'm so transparent. But again, there's a lot of bullshit and there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. And one thing that I did learn from someone who was in a mentorish role again, it was I learned good and bad things, but there was a takeaway very early on that it's you who matters. It's not the gear. It's not the perfectly aligned tape machine. Those are all important things in your technical acumen. Those are tools. And it's what tools we choose, but it's who's wielding the tools. I could sit down with the tools that I have and do a job I'm so proud of. Somebody else could sit down with the tools that I have and be so confounded, and vice versa, And that just is the experience, the expertise, the years of doing. It just kind of is what it is. It's reminding me too of what you said about can mixers be mastering engineers? And you didn't actually pose that question, but I am happy to say something I'm deeply interested in is no gatekeeping, no black and white lines. I absolutely know producers and mixers who are incredible mastering engineers, and sometimes turn into me a product that I'm like, this sounds incredible. Do we want to talk about what's left to be done here? And maybe there is a little bit. That's the thing about mastering, where sometimes it's the tiniest thing, sometimes it's a huge amount, and maybe that's some of the mystery of why people get confused about it. But yeah, I could easily list off producer engineers that I also think are incredibly adept at mastering, and I have zero qualms about that. It doesn't seem nonsensical. I mean, it's just where we all choose to focus our energies. I have, in this part of the field, I've chosen to focus exclusively on mastering. I'm not trying to recalibrate going back 25 years, having also focused on mixing. Have I mixed things? Yes, especially for my own projects over the years.
Mm-hmm.
Would I put myself up against a mixer with 25 years experience? Inherently, no. Would I, when I'm working on my own music now, which is not to say, who knows? Maybe it'd be great. It's just not where my interest lies. I have other things I need to do to thrive. So if I'm working on my own music at this point, I'm pulling in the best mixers that I have in mind because I want that expertise and I want that dialogue with them. And then I'll master it myself because I can't not. But yeah, it's so much more blurry than we were taught, that everything had to be regimented and separated. And it's really just a whatever serves, however it serves. If you're working with somebody start to finish, tracking, mixing, mastering, and they do what you want, and whoever that worked out on a budget that serves your project and allows you to pay your bills and everything else, why would that be bad? That's incredible.
Yeah, I think just and I'm not trying to cast any major shade here on. I have people in my brain that I don't want to. I'm not trying to throw them under the bus or sully their good names, but there's definitely a level of people that seem like they've created this super duper high level perception, and they don't want to see things change. But I think the reality is shit is changing. It's like sands in the desert. They are shifting continually. Who's mastering, who's mixing, those roles are merging daily. And the technology obviously has fueled a lot of that. And the improvement in the technology, I feel, is really helped in many ways. But it threatens that model of that of the high end, beautiful amounts of gear and a giant, facility. That is under threat. Those people are under threat, and I understand their concern because they've shaped their business model on that.
Well, absolutely. I mean, it's like, how many studios have we seen close or flee New York City? Almost all of them. And there's economic reasons for that. It's the industry does not provide in the ways that it used to. Rents are absorbent, like just insane.
Yeah.
Like, I get it. And the changing nature of how the work can be done if you do want to evolve and change. But we're all just kind of along for a ride and doing it the best that we can, which, yeah, it's more fuel, in my opinion, to the fire of just trying not to get stuck in norms. Because once again, I mean, there's so much beauty in it. It's like, I'm going to be critical, so let me hold the other half. There's so much beauty in it. I adore, to this day, walking into a gorgeous studio with tons of gear. It sets me at ease in a way that really speaks to what I was building when I was younger, what I was a part of when I was younger, and how that seemed like it always might be. And things have changed so much.
Now, are you talking about mastering or recording?
Both. I mean, there are still examples of really beautiful mastering studios. There are obviously examples of really beautiful recording studios, but how these things get funded looks different than ever.
Oh yeah.
And so it's not necessarily always even money coming directly from the music industry that makes like a highly boutique or highly mainstream studio possible. It's money coming from maybe like tech investors or something else, because the industry does not support itself on the same model that it used to.
Yeah. You've said something there that I think is it's becoming more prevalent than ever. And that is people who have made money in other industries, whether they're audio people or not, because there are some people who are audio people who've made big money in other industries. But then, what's the studio in France where Brad Pitt has, dumped a bunch of money into it? That's, I can't remember what it's called.
Sounds great.
But, essentially, I've seen it here in San Francisco time and time again. Tech people who sold some program made billions of dollars, or art people, and they've created spaces that really benefit the community.
Yeah, totally. Which is an interesting statement on, the world that we live in, capitalism, the way arts mostly isn't, but somewhat is funded in this country, including versus other countries. There's different levels of support from like artist up to larger endeavors like businesses. It would take a lot to, do, for example, like a big, huge new studio from scratch right now. And it would take an ongoing investment, because while there still is, obviously, music industry is beloved, it's vast, it drives so many people's lives. And, we're in an era where the breakdown of how artists get paid, the most important people in this process, like none of the rest of us exist without the art getting made, are the most underserved in the entire process in terms of how that art is mirrored back to them in value. And
Mhm.
that's, respect to people who've been able to put it at this higher level where it does bring in the money, but it's not like they're not getting screwed too. Like the percentages are bad for them too, even if they're thriving. And that is an enormous problem that I don't have the solution for in my day-to-day life. To some degree, life makes us just keep on grinding. And I'm like, I do the thing that I do as well as I can. And I'm not sure how to change an industry that disenfranchises the thing that it puts on a pedestal.
Let me transition to the topic of that we started in the very beginning, talking about balancing your mastering world with your stage world.
Yeah.
You talked a little bit about identity between, like also when it comes to naming, do I need a studio name or do I just go by my own name?
Yeah.
And I mentioned early on that I identified with it because one of the things that I think I've struggled with, and I'm curious how this materializes in your world, is that I've been an audio engineer for 30 years. I've been a podcaster for 10 of those 30 years. And yet the podcast is well known, which is great, but I don't see myself as a content creator, as a podcaster. Like I'm just an engineer with a podcast. And sometimes I struggle with that. I struggle with like, well, shit, I don't know if I want to be known as a podcaster. It's a little late for that, but because I'd rather be known as an audio engineer. So in your world, tell me of your struggles between being a mastering engineer and wanting to be known in that world, but also being known as an artist. Or is there a struggle? Does it even work in the same way?
I will answer that question. Could I ask you a question first?
Oh, sure.
Do you have fun doing the podcasting?
Oh, yeah. I mean, this conversation, the things I'm learning from you, the things I've learned from those who have come before you, it's made me a better person. It's made me a better engineer.
Yeah.
I feel, so the short answer, yes, I have a ton of fun. It educates the hell out of me.
Yeah. I mean, that I just want to honor how rare it is that we choose to keep growing. That's not true. Humans are working hard all the time. Let me give them more credit. But like, if there's ways to do this short, fleeting, often painful, often miraculous life that include more fun and more growing, and more connecting, to me, that's just like, oh, I just want to celebrate you for that. And the caretaking a little bit over like mama bear part is like, oh, I want to ease you feeling strain around that. And of course, if your like soul is saying, and I want to be more on a pedestal for engineering. I also love to brainstorm. So I'm like, we could brainstorm that, maybe whatever. But I guess for me, I've been on a long journey of trying to accept all of the things that I am. And there may yet be things I don't know that I'm still gonna cross some new bridges on. But I think if I'm answering your question, it was like there was multiple identities for me for a long time. And that seemed necessary at the time, which I could touch on, but it's much more real. It has much more integrity for me right now to be everything at once. It's a little crazy, but none of them take away from each other. Well, I could speak more on that. Well, say early on in the industry, especially, I have referenced some bullshit vaguely. It was actually super important to me that anything that I was creating was separate from any part of the music industry that I struggled with the integrity of. So it was also kind of funny because I, at that point, had a lot of connections at major labels and all this other stuff. And I think I was raised, even though we're not from the Midwest, somehow it permeated to be like overly respectful to the point of standing in your own way. So at no point did I ever cross the streams of, oh, let me try and ask these connections that I have for help with my own thing. I was so ludicrously separate and respectful that probably to a degree, people on each side didn't know that I did the other thing. And that kind of naturally sort of started to dissipate as I changed certain circumstances in both aspects of those careers and felt more clear about holding it together. I mean, I think also maybe in that time, like late 90s, you were supposed to be one thing. I mean, to a
Mhm.
degree, I still feel like a bit of a unicorn in the industry because I don't know any other mastering engineers that are also actively touring, actively releasing music, actively doing this. And prove me wrong, world, because I'm not sometimes I have blinders on just to keep life going,
Mhm.
but I'm not following a model that was shown to me like you can do this and here's how you do it.
I'm struggling to think of a mastering engineer that tours and plays on stage.
Yeah. Yeah, and
I'm sh
I'm not out here trying to tour 24/7. It's
Right.
not my goal, but, like, for example, I'd only ever had my own bands prior. I am not a session musician. That said with deep respect to what they can do, which is not my area of expertise. I'm a weirdo creator. But when talking with Kim Gordon about her solo project, I can't think of a single person that would be more of a yes to me, and I was like, "I will. I will play in your band. I would be honored to." And that has been a crazy ride of a lifetime for the last 5 years. I kind of forgot where that cues into the different things, but it was like all the being all the different things that we are. And then even in the expansiveness of, well, I am this, but I'm going to take it a little bit of a different turn. And
Mhm.
that will, oh, right, touring. Yeah. So in the past, touring for me wasn't so demanding that it like took me out for 6 months at a time or whatever. Sometimes for the Kim stuff, there's longer chunks. Like last year, we did a lot because it was around an album release cycle, and she really deserves it, and the world reacted really well. It was so beautiful. But this year, there's not very much. Like I'm going to South America in a couple weeks for 4 shows, and then I'll be back, and then I have most of the rest of the year to myself. I have all my time to myself. It's just what I choose, and I still choose to work with Kim when she wants to work with me.
And I'd be remiss if I didn't say this, but I think that, what we're talking about plays right into, as my audience knows, my hardcore push for diversification, because I think it makes a more well-rounded person, but it also creates these different income streams, which as audio professionals helps us on the survival front.
Yeah, that is a super interesting thing to me. I am still trying to figure that out because me being a full-time mastering engineer makes more money than me being a mastering engineer and an artist. And that is not like I'm being treated poorly. I'm working with amazing people who are treating me wonderfully, but touring pays less than mastering. So if I choose that there's a nourishment in my soul to go out supporting Kim, I'm going to have a worse month or a worse couple months.
You're going to take a
And
pay hit.
I sure am. And to a degree, I'm not completely immune to the like, oh, what if I miss some projects? What if I miss some people? This kind of thing. It's not a big issue, but it's not like because I'm so much more visible as an artist that I get infinitely more mastering projects.
Hmm.
And this is interesting. Who knows? I also, because of some of the history in the industry that I'm still working my way around, which sounds a little silly, but we all need therapy. Um, I haven't worked super hard to uh, what's the word? Do like all the marketing that a lot of people would just very normally do about themselves as mastering engineer. I have a brilliant batch of I mostly deal with artists. I'm open to relationships with labels where they kind of like funnel more stuff, but I mostly deal on an artist by artist basis and
Mhm.
they bring their project to me, which is really cool. Kind of speaks to the artist that I am in some ways. But yeah, like even doing this is the last time. Well, I did some really cool shit at Blackbird in Nashville a couple weeks ago, and it was really fun, honestly, which made it even more like, oh, I'm going to say yes to this because I had so much fun shooting one of those inside Blackbirds. And then I talked to talked to students at the Blackbird Academy for hours, and we had so much fun. And I was like, oh God, it's cathartic to actually share some of this from this history.
Yeah.
When, some of it made me pretty frustrated. I was pretty frustrated with music, not with artists, not with whatever, but music industry stuff. I can get frustrated about how certain things are the way that they are. And so I don't always participate in a way that would ultimately benefit me by being more seen. And so experimenting with what that might be, experimenting with having a conversation like this with you. It's like, I'm
Yeah.
not going to say all the things that normally people might come on in self-promotion. I'm much more interested in a life led and trying to figure out how to keep on doing that in a healthy and sane way that ultimately benefits everybody in my sphere, the people I'm working with, my friends, my family, etc.
I find that when you're working directly with artists, especially who are in control of their own operation, it's so much better on so many levels because just on the money alone, you get paid at the end of the project, and it's not like I've bitched about this before. It's 60, 90, 120, 6 month a year billing where it's
Yeah.
like, oh, we didn't pay for that. Oh yeah. You're going to have to fill this form out.
Yeah. Yeah. We mailed the check. Where?
We mailed the check.
It's like you have my address.
You have to log into the portal.
Oh my God. Yes. And when it works, it works. It's like most of those bumps are kind of worked out right now with the people that I work with, but who knows? Again, there is space for me to take on some more things, and I'm here for it, and I'm open to it, but like it has to be kind of elevated and meeting me where I'm at, and I meet people where I make the fuck sure that I can bring something to them that elevates them. And so that's a little different than just like saying yes to everything that comes in the door, but it's also highly personal, and it's how I feel good about how I treat artists right now.
Okay, so it's almost been 2 years in Los
Yep.
Angeles. You're staying relatively portable. Have you explored the possibilities of renting a space, teaming up with a different space, setting up shop in a house? Like what are
Sure.
you thinking?
I do rent a space. So I live in Silver Lake right now, and I have a separate little studio space in Silver Lake that's it's like 10 minutes that way. And that's where my stuff is set up because I have found through the years that it's necessary for me to have it out of my house. I do love this LA life where people have houses and then they have back houses and that's their studio. That would be cool. It's not in my sphere right now. My ideal is evolving, but it certainly does involve separation of home and creator space and home and engineering space.
Right, because you've got home and then mastering and performance and
Yeah.
it's
I'm
like
a
the home.
I'm a little more comfortable with those two things living in the same space, but then I also still definitely have to work on my boundaries where it's like these 5 hours go to mastering, these 8 hours go to mastering, it's not so specific, but it's like Tuesday, Thursday, Friday gets my attention in this way, and that's part of the balance that's still being worked out. But if you have a cool studio space, you might as well put all your cool guitars and pedals there too.
Of course.
Um, but yeah, okay. What did I miss on that question that I've already
Oh,
forgotten?
no. I just like, where do we go from here? You have a space and
Yeah. Well, and there was a question sort of about like merging, and I've been independent. I've been independent, honestly, since 2007, but I still chose for another like 8 years to rent rooms in facilities that were known. So like I was no longer part of those businesses, but I was renting space inside of well-known rooms. And I had to look at that very seriously in terms of what those percentages were, because at that point, everything I was doing was generated by my history, my discography. It's not like I was getting any significant amount of other income, other projects coming in from the businesses. And there's a very high toll for just being in a room of somebody else's financially. So as the industry continued to change, as digital options continued to improve, I unlearned some of those rules about it has to be this picture and decided, right, there's ways that I need to support myself, my family, my health that can look different. And that was the beginning of that transition where there were bumps. There was, like, how's this going to feel? But it's come to such a place of confidence. I will say I do have a tremendous amount of nostalgia for aspects of the industry when I entered it in the 90s. Like, I don't have nostalgia about many aspects that we could it's a whole different conversation about how people were treated, about certain ethos, certain normalizations of behaviors. But as a kid that was obsessed with music, walking into places where incredible people had been, incredible art had been made, regardless of what I know now about the smoke and mirrors aspect of a lot of things that look pretty. Yeah, I still have a lot of nostalgia about what that could be. And there's a part of me that keeps an open question about who would I partner with? It would have to be really, 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 and we all get our own definition, but it'd have to be really good people because I'm on a no bullshit zone. I can't do bullshit anymore. So
Are you on a bullshit diet?
I'm anti-bullshit, anti-inflammatory, anti-bullshit. And that's been an interesting process. Like, I've opened up to a few conversations lately, and it has been nice to see that there are some people who feel honestly a little more about the industry in a way that's akin to me because, again, I didn't come up surrounded by some of the same inherent ethos. So it's not a closed door. It would need to be a really, really good fit for me to kind of merge. And again, I'm in this kind of funny position where everything's working, and I am this weird, in some ways, like one of one in how my brand is broad and interesting. My brand, just a little vomit in that, but it's also like we got to take agency over who we are and who we've been, and that's been an important thing to be like, wow, there's actual value in this, and it would take being met with like clear eyes on how can we help, how can we be elevating, how can we all be in our own ways on the same page of raising the bar rather than staying stuck in any old ideas or making compromises that don't serve artists or stuff like this. So right now things are, I am my own business, but we'll see.
A lot of what you've talked about to me, as I perceive it, is I'm one who pushes back on people who always give me the, well, this is how we've always done it kind of vibe. I hate that. It drives me nuts. And I'm always a person who's in search of improving whatever situation, systems, ways of doing things, whether it's for me or for others.
Totally.
Always on the hunt for like, what if we did it like this instead of, doing it like we've always done it. Yeah. So a lot of what you say resonates with me quite a bit. So, well, in conclusion, because we're about out of time here, a couple different things. If for the audience, if they want to visit your website, it is sarahregister.com, right?
Yep, easy. Just my name.com. And there's an email link that goes straight to my like administrative booking person right now. So that's where the email pops them directly to, which is one step away from me. I generally get CC'd on all the responses from that.
Do you generally have one rate for everybody, or is it kind of a sliding scale because there might be a project that has little budget and you want to be part of it?
Absolutely. This is a tricky one. I've been aiming for one rate because I've been in this industry so long, and at times I have undervalued myself, and it is important to honor what's real. And I, really straightforwardly, I choose to live in these very expensive cities, and it's a thing. That said, there's always some flexibility in dialogue, you know, and tons and tons of the people that I work with are independent musicians. I'm an independent musician. I know how this works. I know how money goes. I know that it's not coming in from some of the sources we were promised, you know, all this other stuff. So I have a lot of empathy for this, and I'm trying to figure out how to walk the line because it does really matter. There absolutely are projects that I want to be involved in that may not be able to meet the rate. And so for me, I am pretty busy, but again, I'm working more and more on efficiency so that I can be more present and take on new stuff as it comes in. I can say the easiest place for me to bend right now is on time. Like if somebody has more time, it's easier for me to have a dialogue about, okay, where can we meet that makes this work for you? If somebody has a rush project that they need done in 48 hours, I would really appreciate if they paid the normal rush price, because if I'm moving people's stuff around for them and blah, 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 I'm not going to say my heartstrings don't get pulled, because they absolutely do, depending on things. But yeah, it's a funny one. I think most people would answer that to a degree, there's some flex while they are also, you know, trying to maintain, ideally, not just their basic being able to keep their lights on, but something that moves towards stability towards their family while also having a tremendous amount of understanding and empathy for the position independent artists are in.
Yeah. Well, on that note, Sarah, thank you so much for making time for me and audience. I pulled this again, like last minute. Was like, oh crap, I don't have a guest this week. And then Andy Hong out of nowhere texts me and says, hey, by the way, do you know Sarah? And Sarah was very kind in responding rapidly and saying, sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah.
I'll come on and you know, do this last minute for something that I probably should, you know, be given at least 3 weeks warning.
Well, I'm having a lot of fun reconnecting with Andy. We know each other from the way back. Do you know him well?
I think I've known Andy for 20 years.
Yeah, he and I were talking about that the other day. It was like, I think we met at the very first Tape Op conference. I'm like, this makes sense.
Were you there?
Oh, yeah.
I was there too.
Yeah. Those were the days, weren't they?
Those were the days.
But yeah, so I thought it was fun, and Andy had also connected me to the Blackbird thing that I did, and I had so much fun doing that in a way where I was like, you know what, actually, I will talk about this a little bit more. I will let the world see a little bit more of this, because I have been doing this for so long, and as much as everybody gets to do it different, I really like how I do it. I really like how I treat people and how I do it and how I show up. And so there is a lot of learning, especially when I was talking to the students. I was like, oh, this is a dream, because I can just give it to you all straight. And maybe that matters. You know, I'm not saying I changed anybody's life, but maybe it mattered a little bit. And it certainly mattered to me. And yeah, and I respect what you're doing out here in the world. And like you said, we'd sort of missed each other in a connection before. And I was like, well, the universe is doing its thing. So let's go, synchronicity.
I know it's brought us back together here, courtesy of our mutual friend. And well, very cool. So audience, sarahregister.com. That'll be in the show notes. You check it out. And once again, Sarah, thank you so much for your time and all the wisdom you've brought to us today.
Oh, cheers. Thank you for saying that. I mean, it's been such a pleasure to talk. So thank you for the questions and the back and forth. I appreciate learning more about where you're at and where your head is with stuff. So that makes it easier to talk about mine.
Excellent. Well, thanks again and take care.
Take care.